After discussing the three chapters in GS3 Internal Security Mains 2026 Marathon, those are terror financing, Jammu and Kashmir equation, and radicalization. We discussed these three chapters in the first part of this marathon, and we are doing this second part of this marathon. We are going to discuss these four chapters, that is chapter 4 hybrid warfare, chapter 5 cyber warfare, chapter 6 critical infrastructure, and chapter 7 cybercrime and DPDP, that is digital data protection rules. And we are going to discuss the chapter number 4, that is hybrid warfare and multi-domain threats. What is hybrid warfare and what is multi-domain threats? Ask yourself a strange question. What is that? The war that never declared itself. Is India at war today? No tanks are rolling, no war has been declared, and yet a proxy attack in Pahalgam, a malware probe on a power utility, a coordinated disinformation surge on your social media feed, a supply chain quietly squeezed, a drone crossing the border with a payload. Each incident individually stays below the threshold of war. Together they are a strategy. What is that strategy? The strategy has a name, that is hybrid warfare. This chapter is the umbrella over half of your internal security syllabus. Terrorism, cyber, information warfare, economic coercion. These are all under hybrid warfare is the frame that connects them. And UPSC loves questions that reward connection. So this is in this chapter we are going to discuss all these things. So what is the defining spectrum here? Defining spectrum is synchronized below the threshold of the war. So comes to the definition first and keep it crisp here. Hybrid warfare is the synchronized use of military and non-military instruments by state and non-state actors to achieve strategic objectives while staying below the threshold of conventional war. Hybrid warfare is the synchronized use of military and non-military instruments by state and non-state actors to achieve strategic objectives while staying below the threshold of conventional war. So now the spectrum, learn it as one sweep from the kinetic end to the invisible end. Conventional military pressure at the border, proxy terrorism through non-state actors like cyber attacks on infrastructure and institutions, information warfare and disinformation, economic coercion, trade, technology, and finance used as weapons. So, inference with satellites and navigation systems, drones for smuggling, surveillance, and strikes, psychological operations against social cohesion, and attacks on critical infrastructure. The subject of chapter 6 we are going to discuss. The one attacker, nine instruments, one integrated campaign. So, hybrid warfare has blurred the distinction between external aggression and internal security. The border is no longer a line on the map, it runs through networks, markets, screens, and minds. So, what are the things? Conventional military pressure? No. Proxy terrorism, cyber attacks on infrastructure, information warfare, economic coercion, satellite and navigation interference, drones, smuggling, strike, ISR, psychological operations, attacks on critical infrastructure. So these are all the things define the spectrum. So Why adversaries choose hybrid? Why adversaries choose hybrid rather than conventional? Now build a habit that will serve you for the rest of this marathon. Think like the adversary. Why fight hybrid instead of fighting openly? Why? One, deniability. A proxy group, a patriotic hacker, collective, an anonymous bot network. Attribution is slow, contested, and rarely court proof. So, deniability. Then, second one, cost asymmetry. A disinformation campaign costs a fraction of an armored division. Armored division. And a single successful cyber intrusion can impose losses out of all proportion to its price. So cost asymmetry. A disinformation campaign, a disinformation campaign costs a fraction of an armored division, and a single successful cyber intrusion can impose losses out of all proportion to its price. So third one, what is the third one? Threshold management. Each action is calibrated to stay below the level that would justify open retaliation. Each action is calibrated to stay below the level that would justify open retaliation. Exploiting exactly the legal vacuum we will study in the chapter 5. And the fourth one, time. Hybrid warfare is patient. It erodes rather than invades. So trust in institutions, cohesion between communities, confidence in the economy. So this thing comes under time. And fifth one, deterrence proofing. Conventional and nuclear deterrence protect borders. They do not protect narratives, networks, or supply chains. So why these things these things are useful? So that is why adversaries choose this type of hybrid warfare. Why they are choosing adversaries hybrid? First one, deniability, and second one, cost asymmetry, and third one, threshold management, and fourth one, time, and fifth one, deterrence proofing. So deniable, cheap, below threshold level, patient, and undeterred. That is why adversaries choose hybrid warfare rather than conventional one. Conventional one. What is India's hybrid threat picture? Now map the spectrum onto India. Four fronts. Name them in your answer when you are going to write an answer. Front one, that is the proxy front. Cross border terrorism as the oldest hybrid instrument. External sponsorship, local facilitation, and modern communication and navigation tools deployed together. The combination assessed in the Pahalgam attack. Details in chapter 1 and 2 we discussed. Here cited as hybrid warfare's kinetic edge. So first one, proxy front, like sponsorship abroad, facilitation at home, etc. etc. Then second one, the cyber front. The state sponsored advanced persistent threats probing power, banking, telecom, government networks, espionage in peacetime, sabotage capability held in reserve for crisis. This is most important, cyber one. And next one, that is information front. Disinformation engineered to inflame communal fault lines, discredit institutions, and manufacture unrest, amplified algorithmically at population scale, often from beyond our jurisdiction. So this is also your entry point for the syllabus head on the role of media and social network sites in internal security. So this is information front. And fourth one, the economic front. The economic survey 2025-2026 names the phenomena. What is that phenomena? Weaponized interdependence, coercive tariffs, technology denial, export controls, supply chain manipulation, control over critical inputs. When one country controls your critical technology, processing capacity, energy routes or payments architecture, interdependence itself becomes a weapon. So we build this fully in the chapter number 14. Here, plant it as the fourth front of hybrid war. So these are all four things. India's hybrid threat picture, four fronts: proxy, cyber, information, economic. So India faces hybrid pressure on four fronts simultaneously: proxy, cyber, informational, and economic. And the defining feature is synchronization. Each front amplifies the others. So synchronization is defining feature. Each front amplifies the others. So then we are moving to next scene, that is India's doctrinal response. That is part 1, cyberspace as an operational domain. Now the response here, and here you carry material most aspirants have never read. India's giant doctrine of India's giant doctrine for cyberspace operations, released by the Chief of Defence Staff in June 2024, with a declassified version formally released at the Chiefs of Staff Committee meeting on 7th August 2025 and now publicly accessible. The declassification is itself worthy a clause. A war-fighting doctrine put into the public domain is a signaling act as much as an administrative one. So, what is the doctrine's foundational move? It treats cyberspace as an operational domain of warfare. It treats cyberspace as an operational domain of warfare. Alongside land, air, sea, and space covering networks, satellites, communication system, and control infrastructure. What are its components, important components? Its important components we are going to, and we have to learn 6. That is defensive cyber operations, offensive cyber operations, cyber intelligence and reconnaissance, cyber support to land, air, maritime, and space operations, resilience, redundancy, and recover, and interoperability among the three services and civil agencies. Add its operating principles: threat informed planning, layered defense, real time response. And its strategic framing, the doctrine explicitly links cyberspace operations to preparedness for hybrid and multi-domain conflict. One forward looking line here is because it shows where the architecture is going. The CDS has initiated further doctrines on military space operations, multi-domain operations, special forces operations, and integrated logistics. India is writing the doctrinal vocabulary for multi-domain warfare now, which is precisely the vocabulary this chapter is teaching you. So this is the doctrinal answer. This is the cyberspace as an operational domain. In this, where we learn 6 things: defensive cyber operations, offensive cyber operations, cyber intelligence reconnaissance, support to land, air, and sea space, and resilience, redundancy, recovery, civil military interoperability. Cyber operation, cyberspace, an operational domain of warfare alongside land, air, sea, and space. So this is the operational domain of warfare. So what are the principles here? Threat informed, layered, real time. And next we are going to discuss space, multi-domain, special forces and logistics. So comes to the doctrine anchor part. What is the doctrine anchor? Giant doctrine for cyberspace operations. Cyberspace as an operational domain. Six components: defensive operations, offensive operations, cyber intelligence, cyber support to other domains, resilience, redundancy recovery, and civil military interoperability. So this is all regarding about the doctrinal answer, cyberspace as an operational domain. Then we are moving to scene number 6, that is India's doctrinal response, part 2. The integrated shield use one illustration, not as a separate chapter, but as a named example that elevate your answer. That is Mission Sudarshan Chakra. What it represents? What it represents? An announced multi-layered air and missile defense shield for strategic and civilian installations, integrating detection, strategic and civilian installations, integrating detections, tracking and interception, built on indigenous technological development. Describe it in those terms only. It is an air defense program, not a cross domain cyber shield, and answers that stretch it into other domains are marked down. So, one sentence is enough in the exam. What is that sentence? Mission Sudarshan Chakra illustrates the shift from platform centric air defense to platform centric air defense to an integrated indigenous layered protective shield. What is Mission Sudarshan Chakra? We are, if you have to write in an answer, you can write in one sentence is enough in the examination. What is that sentence? That is, I am going to tell you. Mission Sudarshan Chakra illustrates the shift from platform centric air defense to an integrated indigenous layered protective shield. But a capability is not a demonstration. For that, this chapter has something better, that is scene 6A, that is Operation Sindur, the multi domain answer. Now we are going to demonstrate. If scene 2 taught you what a synchronized multi instrument campaign looks like when an adversary runs it, this scene shows you India running one. That is, carry it as the chapter's worked example. It is the single most valuable illustration in the marathon because it answers the hybrid question in the hybrid question's own grammar. What is the campaign? The campaign Operation Sindur began on 7th May 2025 following the Pahalgam attack. Multi-agency intelligence confirmed 9 major camps, which were the targets. A punitive intelligence-led campaign against terror infrastructure across the line of control and deeper inside Pakistan, planned for minimal collateral damage. Note what the design says about doctrine before you describe the execution. Targets confirmed by fused intelligence, restraint exercised deliberately, and the terror infrastructure, not territory, as the object. That is chapter 1 6 propositions executed. Then the second phase, which is part most candidates will miss. Pakistan responded with drone and unmanned combat aerial vehicle attacks on Indian airbase and logistics infrastructure. The campaign therefore ran in both directions, and India's answer was a layered defensive architecture rather than a single system. The Air Force conducted the precision strikes, including on the Nur Khan and Rahimyar Khan air bases, and then held the air defense environment. combining the indigenous Akash surface to air missile system with legacy Pechora and OSA AK platforms in a layered grid, coordinated in real time through the integrated air command and control system. The Army's air defense units worked in tandem from shoulder fired manpads and low level air defense guns to long range SAMs, countering successive waves of drones and loitering munitions. So the Navy deployed a carrier battle group with MiG 29K fighters and airborne early warning helicopters, holding persistent surveillance and battling up Pakistani air elements along the Makran coast, denying operational space at sea without firing across it. So, on the border, security force thwarted an infiltration attempt at Samba in Jammu, neutralizing two infiltrators, the internal security limb of the same campaign running simultaneously. So, an integrated command and control strategy enabling real time threat identification, assessment, and interception across domains. So, Operation Sindhu demonstrated that the answer to a multi domain campaign is a multi domain campaign. Strikes, layered air defense, maritime denial, and border interdiction synchronized as one operation rather than sequenced as four. India did not respond to hybrid warfare in a different grammar. It responded in the same one. And the honest class that keeps the answer analytical rather than celebratory. This was a conventional military demonstration of giantness. The information and economic fronts of scene 4 were not answered by it. And those are the fronts on which hybrid pressure continues between crises. So, what happened? Operation Sindur. What is the machinery behind it? We discussed in this, like Air Force, Army, Navy, BSF, bound by integrated command control strategy. What is the machinery behind it? Giantness, command CDS, three agencies, law, Inter Services Organization Act 2023, structure, networks, sustainment. And then we are moving to the next scene, that is missionary behind the giantness. A demonstration link Sindhu does not happen because three services decide to cooperate on the day. It happens because the plumbing was laid first, and the examiner rewards a candidates who can name the plumbing. What is the command here? The chief of who is command here? The chief of defense staff, created December 2019, a four-star officer heading the Department of Military Affairs 2020, principal military advisor on tri-services matters, and the officer who leads the tri-services organizations, including those for cyber and space. What are the domain agencies? And name all three, because most answers name one. In September 2018, at the combined commanders conference, the government approved a defense cyber agency, a defense space agency, and an armed forces special operation division. Three tri-service bodies, one for each of the domains that conventional command structures did not cover. So their lineage runs back to the Naresh Chandra Task Force of 2011, which reviewed the Kargil Review Committee's unfinished business and recommended exactly these three as tri-service commands. What was created in 2018 was a downsized version of the recommendation. Agencies rather than commands, which is itself worth one honest class, that is, India built the offices before it built the commands. India built the offices before it built the commands. What is the law here? The Inter Services Organization Command Control and Discipline Act 2023, which empowers the commander of a tri-service formation to exercise disciplinary authority over personnel of all three services. Unglamorous and load bearing without a unified disciplinary chain. A joint command is an organization chart rather than command. So comes to the structure part. What is the structure here? Integrated theater commands and integrated battle groups with studies underway for land border, maritime and joint air defense theaters. The annual report is candid that this is proceedings by consensus with individual service concerns being addressed. So present theaterization as a live process, not an accomplished fact, according to Minister of Defense Annual Report 2024 and 2025. Comes to networks part. What are the networks? The Defense Communication Network, the Joint Communication Architecture integrating the three services networks with headquarters integrated defense staff and the integrated air command and control system that Sindur proved. What is the sustainment here? The three giant logistics nodes, Mumbai, Guwahati, Port Blair, operational since 2021. And the framing, the ministry designated 2025 the year of reforms with giantness integration and theaterization as its declared focus. Giantness in India has moved from exhortation to architecture. A chief of defense staff to command it. A 2023 statute to discipline it. Theater commands to structure it. And giant networks and logistics nodes to sustain it. Operation Sindur was the output. This is the machinery. This is the machinery. Hybrid threat, integrated answer, and now you can name both halves. So then we are moving to next scene, that is the information front deserves its own paragraph. In the exam, most students will write cyber and stop. You will write the information dimension because the syllabus explicitly names it. Why disinformation is a security threat, not a nuisance. Security threat, not a nuisance. It polarizes communities, the oldest objective of our adversaries. It corridors trust in institutions, courts, elections, police, science. It can trigger real world violence from manufactured provocation. It operates at machine speed and population scale. And deep fakes now let adversaries fabricate the evidence itself. The response palette, rapid official communication and pre-bunking, platform accountability and traceability obligations, AI based detection of coordinated inauthentic, inauthentic behavior, digital literacy as a civic defense, and lawful proportionate action, because an overboard clampdown damages the very trust the adversary is trying to destroy. So here we are discussing information front. Why it information, disinformation? Why is a security threat? Why? Polarizes communities, corrodes trust in institutions, triggers violence from manufactured provocation, machine speed, population scale, and deep fakes fabricate the evidence itself. That is why information or disinformation is a security threat. For that, what is the response? The response palette is rapid official communication and pre-bunking, platform accountability and traceability, AI detection of inauthentic behavior, digital literacy as civic defense, and lawful proportionate action. So now name the Indian machinery, because a palette without instruments is a generic answer. So the governing framework is the information technology, intermediary guidelines, and digital media ethics code rules 2021, which condition an intermediaries safe harbor on due diligence and time bound takedown, and carry the one case that makes the examinable, because it is a live constitutional dispute rather than a settled scheme. The IT Amendment Rules of 2023 empower the government to notify a fact check until a fact check unit to flag false or misleading content concerning the government's own business. The Press Information Bureau's unit was notified as that body in March 2024. The Supreme Court stayed the notification almost immediately. In September 2024, the Bombay High Court struck the provision down as unconstitutional, a tie-breaking judgment after a split verdict, holding the terms fake, false, or misleading, vague, and overboard, and the rule liable to have a chilling effect. In March 2026, the Supreme Court agreed to examine the center's appeal but declined to stay the High Court's judgment. So, before the examination, you have to verify the current position before this is under appeal. So, why this belongs to an hybrid warfare chapter and not only a governance one? The disinformation threat, the disinformation, the disinformation threat is real, and so is the objection. A state that appoints itself the arbiter of truth about its own conduct hands in the advisories, the adversary, the argument that is information is propaganda too. The unresolved question. What is the unresolved question here? The unresolved question: who adjudicates falsehood and under what review is not a footnote to the counter disinformation problem. It is the problem. That last class, the proportionality caveat is what separates a mature answer from a mechanical one. So comes to the way forward. What is the way forward here? The whole of nation response. Hybrid threats are integrated. A fragmented response fails by design. Structure your way forward in your four integrations. That is, first one, integrate assessment, fused civil military intelligence threat picture, MAC and cyber MAC as the coordination spine, national level hybrid threat assessment spanning proxy, cyber information, and economic indicators. Then second one, integrate capability, multi-domain doctrine implemented jointly, indigenous technology from air defense to navigation to cyber tools to cut dependence on systems an adversary can deny or exploit. Then third one, integrate society, digital literacy, community resilience, transparent communication, because the target of hybrid war is public trust, and trust is defended by citizens, not only soldiers. And fourth one is integrate economy, supply chain resilience, strategic stockpiles, trusted technology partnerships, the chapter 14 agenda, that is, so that economic coercion finds no single point of failure. So these four things are needed. These four things are needed under way forward the whole of nation response, that is hybrid threats are integrated. So what are the a fragmented response fails by design? Structure your way forward in four integrations. So hybrid threats are integrated. So our response should be also integrated, like integrate assessment, integrate capability, integrate society, integrate economy. Then hybrid warfare is won or lost before the shooting starts. In the resilience of infrastructure, the credibility of institutions, the cohesion of society, and the security of supply chains. The response must therefore be whole of nation, not merely whole of government. Then we are moving to PYQ corner, that is UPSC has been circling this chapter for a decade. Analyze the multidimensional challenges posed by external state and non-state actors to internal security of India. Also discuss measures required to be taken to combat these threats. This question asked in 2021, 15 marker question to 50 words answer. That what multidimensional is hybrid warfare asking to be named. Two more sit next door and belong in this answer. The 2016 question, misuse of internet and social media by non-state actors. And 2013, cyber warfare, India's threats and preparedness. So these are all the questions asked in previously, that is 2021, 2016 and 2013. So in this we discussed hybrid warfare. What is the hybrid warfare? What it consists? What are its consists? And why adversaries choose hybrid warfare? How India's theaters and how India is vulnerable, and how India responds for the hybrid threat warfare in illustration as Operation Sindoor. So comes to the probable question for mains 2026 from this chapter. Hybrid warfare has blurred the distinction between external aggression and internal security. Discuss the nature of hybrid threats facing India and suggest an integrated national response. This is the probable question. Hybrid warfare has blurred the distinction between external aggression and internal security. Discuss the nature of hybrid threats facing India and suggest an integrated national response. What we have to do, our answer, the forefront frame. The forefront frame. First one, define hybrid warfare. Synchronized multi-instrument below threshold. Then, then what we have to write is map India's four fronts: proxy, cyber, informational, economic. Then present the doctrinal response, cyberspace doctrine, and one named illustration, that is Sudarshan Chakra and post Pahalgam integration. Then close with the whole of nation integrations like assessment, capability, society, economy, etc. So in this way you have to write an answer. Why I am giving these scenes and these words this much clearly? Because you are going to write an answer with this content. That is why I am giving in this PPT has dense content rather than single visible content. So that is why I am explaining this much simply, this much in depth for your answer writing. So every chapter that follows, cyber warfare's legal vacuum, critical infrastructure, financing, economic security, is one front of the war you have just mapped. That is chapter number 4. The umbrella is up. Then we are going to discuss next chapter, that is chapter number 5. In this chapter, we are going to discuss cyber warfare and the international legal vacuum. Cyber warfare. This is most important emerging topic, that is cyber warfare. So the threat has matured, the law has not. The gap is this chapter. So this is not the cybercrime chapter. First of all, I am giving you the clarity. One clarification before anything else, because examiners reward students who make this distinction and punish those who blur it. So cyber crime is committed by criminals for money, fraud, ransomware, identity theft. We deal it with fully in chapter 7. But here we are going to discuss cyber warfare. Cyber warfare is different thing. Cyber crime is different thing. Cyber warfare cyber warfare is conducted by states or their proxies for strategic objectives, espionage, sabotage, coercion, battlefield advantage. Same medium, different actor, different motive, different law, or rather, as we are about to see, a body of law that applies in principle and fails at almost every point of application. In 2013, UPSC asked whether cyber warfare is a larger threat than terrorism itself. That question is now 13 years old. The threat has matured. The threat has matured. The law has not. That gap is this chapter. So, what cyber warfare looks like? What cyber warfare looks like? Define it, then populate it. Cyber warfare means state or state sponsored digital operations intended to damage, disrupt, coerce, or gain strategic advantage over another country. Cyber warfare means a state or state sponsored digital operations intended to damage, disrupt, coerce, or gain strategic advantage over another country. Who conducts it? Military cyber units, intelligence agencies, advanced persistent threats, APTs, long duration, well resourced intrusion campaigns, and proxy groups, nominally independent hackers whose targets align suspiciously well with a state's interests. What does it target? Everything chapter 6 taught you to worry about power grids, banking systems, hospitals, satellites, communication networks, and increasingly the commercial digital infrastructure. That those are clouds, platforms, cables, on which both civilian life and military operations run. Make it concrete because an abstract answer on this topic reads as an unread one. Carry two illustration described carefully. The 2010 sabotage of centrifuge control systems at Natanz, malware that crossed from digital into the physical, widely attributed in open sources to state actors and never officially acknowledged by anyone. Natanz. And the 2015 and 2016 attacks the interrupted electricity supply in Ukraine, the first publicly documented cyber induced blackouts. Note how I described both. Widely attributed, never acknowledged, that is not hedging, that is scene's force first gap. So demonstrated in the only two examples, everyone agrees happened. So why cyber warfare keeps expanding? Why? Why? Why cyber warfare keeps expanding? 8 drivers, group them by in 4 pairs for memory. Cheap, deniable, useful, and punished. What is cheap? What is the cheap? Under the cheap, low cost asymmetric advantage, a capable cyber unit costs less than a fighter squadron. And the weaponization of commercial infrastructure. Attackers ride on the same clouds and platform everyone uses. Deniable, plausible deniability through proxies, and genuine difficulty of attribution. So useful, the ability to target civilian infrastructure directly, coercion without invention, and seamless integration with conventional military operations. So cyber as the opening act of any modern conflict. Come to unfinished, unpunished. Weak international deterrence and the heart of this chapter, a legal framework that applies in principle but makes almost none of it answerable in practice. So that is why these are four things we are discussing: cheap, deniable, useful, and unpunished. So then we are moving to next scene, that is legal vacuum four gaps. That is the scene the problem question lives in. The four legal gaps, learn all four, most students know one. That is gap one, attribution gap. Technical attribution is often possible. Forensics can trace tools, infrastructure patterns, but converting intelligence into legally admissible, publicly defensible evidence is another matter entirely. So intelligence sources cannot be revealed. Proxies provide a cutout, and international law has no agreed standard for when attribution is proven. This is gap number one, that is attribution. Then second one is the use of force threshold. What is use of force threshold? The UN Charter prohibits the use of force. The UN Charter prohibits the force of use of force and permits self-defense against an armed attack. But international law does not clearly answer: is a power grid shutdown an armed attack? A hospital system attack, banking system paralysis, satellite disruption. No agreed threshold means no agreed right of response, and adversaries calibrate their attacks to live permanently inside that ambiguity. So, this is the legal engine of the hybrid warfare we mapped in chapter 4. So, use of the threshold, use of force threshold. And third gap is jurisdiction and enforcement. States broadly accept that international law applies in cyberspace. The failure is not of capability but of enforcement. Even where attribution succeeds, judicial action stalls when the accused state declines jurisdiction. So there is no cyber court and no compulsory process to reach state perpetrators. The rule exists, the forum does not. So gap 4, that is treaty mismatch. Existing international instruments are built for cybercrime, like individual criminals, police cooperation, evidence sharing. They are structurally unsuited to stop sponsored APTs, intelligence agencies, military cyber units, and proxy organizations. The law chases the hacker and cannot see the state behind him. And now the concrete demonstration. In December 2024, the General Assembly adopted the UN Convention Against Cybercrime. It opened for signatures at Hanoi in October 2025, where 72 states signed. It enters into force 90 days after the 14th ratification, and signature remains open until the end of 2026. India took part in the negotiations and has not signed. Now read what that instrument is. India took part the negotiations and has not signed. Before going to examination, you please check this fact. Now read what that instrument is and is not. It is the most comprehensive global cyber instrument ever adopted, and it is a cyber crime treaty, like offenses, electronic evidences, police cooperation, etc. It does not reach state sponsored operations at all. That is the gap. Proved one. The last most ambitious step forward confirms the vacuum rather than closing it. The last most ambitious step forward confirms the vacuum rather than closing it. So, cyber warfare has become a central instrument of statecraft precisely because international law is uncertainty at every step, like attribution, threshold, jurisdiction, and instrument. The vacuum is not an accident of the law, it is the operating space of the attacker. So, gap 2 is the legal engine of hybrid warfare. Adversaries live inside this ambiguity. Then we are moving to next scene, that is escalation paradox. What is escalation paradox? Here is a subtlety that lifts your answer. Subtlety, subtlety that lifts your answer above the crowd. Why do victim states so often they silent even when they know exactly who attacked them? Because public attribution carries three costs. It exposes intelligence capabilities, revealing how you caught them tells them how to evade you next time. It creates pursuit to retaliate, naming the attacker before you. Your own public converts a convert incident into a political crisis, demanding response, and retaliation risk escalation. A cyber exchange can climb, misread by both sides, toward kinetic conflict. So state absorbs attacks silently. Attackers learns that silence is the likely response, and the cycle strengthens. So this is the way. One line for your exam, that is, in cyberspace, even the victim has incentives to keep the war invisible, and invisibility is what keeps the war going. So this is we discussed about UN Convention Against Cybercrime adopted dignitaries, the escalation paradox, why victim states stay silent. We discussed in this thing, chapter scene 5 exposes intelligence capabilities, creates pressure to retaliate, and retaliation risks escalations. Even the victim has intensive to keep the war invisible. So then we are moving to next scene, that is India's strikes and India's posture. Why does this vacuum matter more to India than to most countries? Because our exposure is enormous and growing. The world's largest digital public infrastructure, a payment system running at civilizational scale, digitalizing grids, ports and railways, and two capable hostile cyber adversaries on our borders. So India's posture, assemble it from what you already hold. Comes to doctrinally, the giant doctrine for cyberspace operations from chapter 4, cyberspace as an operational domain, defensive and offensive operations, civil military interoperability. Then comes to defensively, the chapter 6 architecture, that is NCIIPC for critical information infrastructure, CERTIN for CERTIN for response, CIMAC for multi-agency coordination, and on the military side, the Defense Cyber Agency approved in September 28 alongside the Defense Space Agency, formed by upgrading the earlier Defense Information Assurance and Research Agency, and raised in 2019 under Headquarters Integrated Defense Staff in New Delhi. It is headed by two-star officer reporting to the Chief of Defense Staff through the Integrated Defense Staff, and was fully operational by 2021, by which point each service has stood up its own computer emergency response team. It runs both defensive and offensive cyber operations for the military domain, works alongside the service's own computer emergency response teams, and coordinates outward with certain and the National Technical Research Organization. So the last class is the one to write. It gives chapter 4's giant doctrine, released by the CDS in June 2024, declassified August 2025, an executing authority, and it completes the answer to the 2013 questions. Third limb, India's cyber preparedness is not one stock but two to that meet. A civilian stock running NCIIPC, CERTIN and CIMAC, and a military stock under the CDS. An answer that describes only the has civilian half has described only half of the country's posture. Comes to diplomatically, India engages UN processes on responsible state behavior in cyberspace while protecting its data sovereignty. A balance, not a contradiction, and you should presenting present it as such. So this is the India's posture, not one stock but two. One is civilian stock, and other one is military stock. So civilian stock is NCIIPC. This is critical information infrastructure. Then CERTIN for incident response. Then CIMAC for multi-agency coordination. Then comes to military stock. Defense Cyber Agency, upgrade from Diara, two-star head under the CDS, and coordinates CERT in and NTRO. So this is Defense Cyber Agency. Please, please remember this. Defense Cyber Agency. Comes to doctrinal part. The joint doctrine of chapter 4, diplomatically. UN norms abroad, data sovereignty at home. Describe the civilian half only, and you describe half the posture. So comes to the way forward. What is the way forward? Building law where there is none. Your way forward paragraph. Structure it in two halves. Norms and capability. Norms and capability. The normative agenda. A proposed digital Geneva Convention, an idea advanced in policy debate rather than an instrument in existence, for binding protection of hospitals, nuclear facilities, banking, and essential civilian systems, even in conflict. Say proposed the examiner notices. Say proposed the examiner notices in your answer. A UN backed technical attribution body. A UN backed technical attribution body. Neutral, expert, credible, with shared evidential protocols so attribution can graduate from assertion to finding, clear rules on proportionality and self-defense threshold. So responses are lawful and predictable rather than escalatory. So protected digital zones for essential services and coordinated sanctions. What are the coordinated sanctions? So that even without a court, attribution carries a price. The capability agenda, cyber resilience benchmarks for states, global south threat intelligence partnerships where India can lead, because most victims of the legal vacuum are countries without the leverage to retaliate alone, and continued hardening at home, because until the law arrives, resilience is the only reliable defense. Until international law closes the attribution and threshold gaps, India's realistic strategy is to track, shape the norms abroad, and build resilience at home. Deterrence by denial, where deterrent by punishment is legally impossible. That is why two track frame. Then we are moving to next scene, that is PYQ corner. Cyber warfare is considered by some defense analysts to be a larger threat than even Al Qaeda or terrorism. What do you understand by cyber warfare? Outline the cyber threats which India is vulnerable to, bring out the state of the country's preparedness to deal with the same. 10 marker question asked in 2013, 200 words. 13 years old and ready for its sequel. The sequel is the legal question. Cross-border cyber attacks and defensive measures. This question asked in 2021. So, from this chapter, probable question for mains 2026. What is the question? Cyber warfare has become a central instrument of statecraft, but international law remains uncertain regarding attribution, sovereignty, and the use of force threshold. Discuss. How can we write an answer for this? The vacuum frame. First one, what we have to do is distinguish cyber warfare from cybercrime, like actor, motive, law, etc. Then explain expansion, like cheap, deniable, useful, unpunished, etc. Then anatomize the vacuum. Four gaps: attribution, threshold, immunity, treaty mismatch, plus the escalation paradox, and deliver the two track response, like norms abroad like a digital Geneva Convention proposed and UN attribution body, then resilience at home, doctrine plus chapter 6 architecture. So that is the chapter 5, the war is invisible. Your answers should not be. So that is why this chapter, cyber warfare and the legal vacuum, is most important for your 2026, because the cyber warfare is now central to statecraft, Why? Because the question asked in 2013, the sequel is going to be asked in 2026. Chapter, the sixth chapter is most crucial and important chapter, that is critical infrastructure and cyber physical security. So why this chapter is the centerpiece? Before we start this chapter, one thing needs saying plainly. The syllabus head that houses cyber communication networks, the role of media, and the social networking sites, the basics of cyber security, money laundering, has produced a question in 11 of the last 13 papers. Only 2014 and 2025 went without it. Like types of cybercrime, national cyber security policy, cross-border cyber attacks, elements of cyber security. Every generic version of the cyber question has already been asked. But there is one question sitting in plain sight that UPSC has never asked. What is that? What happens when a cyber attack does not steal your data but switches off your city? Critical infrastructure, cyber physical security. What happens when a cyber attack does not steal your data but switches off your city? This is, in my assessment, among the two or three most probable internal security questions of Mains 2026. So give me your full attention for this one chapter. If you master this, you are carrying a chapter most of the country has not prepared. So what is critical infrastructure? You can start with the definition. Critical infrastructure means those physical, digital, and service assets whose incapacitation or destruction would have a, a debilitating impact on public safety, essential services, economic stability, and national security. Critical infrastructure means those physical, digital, and service assets whose whose incapacitation or destruction would have a debilitating impact on public safety, essential services, economic stability, and national security. So now hold the examples in your mind as a mental map of city, like power grids, oil and gas pipelines, water treatment systems, railways, metros and ports, banking and payment systems, telecom networks, hospitals, data centers, defense support in infrastructure. Note something, every one of these was a purely physical asset. Today, every one of them runs on computers. That single fact is the seed of this entire chapter. So keep the two ideas distinct. Critical infrastructure is the broad category we just defined physical, digital, and service assets. Critical critical information infrastructure is a narrower statutory term, and it is a computer resource concept. Section 70 of the Information Technology Act 2000 empowers the appropriate government to declare any computer resource which directly or indirectly affects a critical information infrastructure facility to be a protected system. So the explanation to that section defines critical information infrastructure as a computer resource whose incapacitation or destruction shall have a debilitating impact on national security, economy, public health, or safety. Section 70A provides for a national nodal agency for protection of critical information infrastructure. NCIIPC is the agency designated under it. On the physical side, MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs, maintains a regularly reviewed security categorization of vital installations, 812 categorized at present, as per MHA Annual Report 2024 and 2025. Why this distinction and marks? An answer that threats the whole grid as CII under Section 70 has misread the statute. So the law reaches the computer resource The physical installations is protected through a different framework entirely, which is layer of science, which is the layer of scene number 7. So in this we discussed what two distinctions that win this question, that is critical infrastructure versus critical information infrastructure. Critical infrastructure and a critical information infrastructure. This is this is statutory term. This is broad category. Then we are moving to next scene, that is information technology versus operation technology. The one distinction that wins the question. Now the conceptual core. If you remember one distinction from this chapter, remember this one. Information technology manages data, emails, databases, websites, records. Operational technology operates physical processes. The systems that opens a pipeline valve, the controller that balances load on an electricity grid, the SCADA system running a water treatment plant, railway signaling, port cranes, hospital equipment. When an IT system is hacked, you lose information. When an OT system is hacked, you lose electricity, water, transport, you lose the physical functioning of society. For decades, operational technology systems were safe for one simple reason: they were isolated, air gapped, not connected to any network. Then came digitalization, efficiency demanded the operational technology systems stuck to IT networks. Remote monitoring, predictive maintenance, Internet of Things sensors on every mission. Efficiency went up and a cyber physical attack surface was born. An internet connected SCADA system, SCADA system can now allow to a hostile actor sitting thousands of kilometers away to remotely manipulate pipeline valves, grid controls, pressure sensors, water treatment, chemistry. So the convergence of IT, OT, and IoT networks has transformed what was once an information security problem into a cyber physical security problem. A breach no longer merely steals data, it can switch off essential services. That is we are discussing in this particular chapter. So why is India's vulnerability increasing? Write these as your challenges paragraph. 7 vulnerabilities. Learn them as a chain. First one, legacy systems. Much of our grid and industrial control equipment were designed decades ago, with no concept of cyber security. The second one is IT/OT convergence without adequate safeguards. Connections made for efficiency without segmentation or monitoring. Third one, imported hardware and firmware. Foreign components sometimes disguised as domestic products. Unverified firmware, imported surveillance and IoT equipment. What is IoT? Internet of Things. Every import is a potential embedded vulnerability. Fourth one, poor visibility. Operators often cannot even see what is happening inside their OT networks. You cannot defend what you cannot monitor. And fifth one, fragmented ownership and regulation. Much critical infrastructure is privately owned. Technical agencies and security agencies coordinated poorly. Security certification processes are slow. And sixth one is shortage of specialized personnel. OT, cybersecurity is a discipline distinct from the ordinary IT security. And India has a very few trained professionals in it. And seventh one, state sponsored advisories. We are not defending against hobby hackers. We are defending against advanced persistent threats run by hostile states and their proxies. So these are vulnerabilities increasing. Why India's vulnerabilities increasing? These use in your challenges paragraph in your answer. Those are legacy systems, IT/OT convergence without safeguards, imported hardware and firmware, then poor visibility, fragmented ownership and regulation, shortage of specialized personnel, and state sponsored advisories. Each link multiplies next, so the way forward is a system, not a list. So that is why we are discussing in the link chain. Then what is the strategic logic here? Why attack infrastructure? Now think like the adversary for a moment. Why should a hostile state attack a power grid instead of a military base? Why? Because a cyber attack on a critical infrastructure offers plausible deniability, attribution slow and contested, low cost, asymmetric advantage against a larger power, covert sabotage, damage without a declaration of war, economic coercion, pressure without a single soldier crossing the border, and the ultimate prize is the ability to paralyze a city without a conventional invasion. And what can a successful attack actually cause? Blackouts, water contamination, pipeline disruption, transport paralysis, hospital failure, financial system disruption, industrial accidents, civilian casualties. So, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure can produce consequences comparable to conventional armed attacks while remaining below the legal threshold of war. This is precisely what makes them the preferred instrument of gray zone conflict. So connect this line to chapter 4 that is hybrid warfare and to chapter 5. The international legal vacuum on what counts use on what counts as a use of force in cyberspace. One line of cross linkage in your answer signals mastery. So this is cyber attacks on critical infrastructure can produce consequences comparable to conventional armed attacks while remaining below the large legal threshold of war. This is precisely what makes the preferred instrument of gray zone conflict. So what is the next scene? Two specific attack surface you must name. Generic answers score average marks. Specific attack surfaces score fetch marks. Carry these two. First one, undersea cables. Submarine cables carry the overwhelming bulk of India's international data. Banking transactions, trade, government and defense communication, cloud services. India's specific vulnerabilities. Concentration of cable landing stations around Mumbai, a classic choke point. Dependence on foreign repair vessels, weak domestic repair capacity, damage from fishing and dredging, and exposure to espionage, sabotage, and wartime disruptions, gray zone attacks with plausible deniability. So, the way forward here, the diversity landing stations, Kochi, Vishakhapatnam, and the other coastal nodes, indigenous cable repair capability, seabed monitoring, and the protection of landing stations as a critical infrastructure. So second one is what? Data centers. The Union Budget 2026-2027 announced a tax incentive for global cloud providers using Indian data centers and a promotion of India's data center and AI enabled digital infrastructure. Understanding the security meaning of this. As data localizes, data centers become critical national infrastructure, concentrated, energy hungry, and attractive targets. Their protection, physical and cyber, now belongs in the CAI framework. Alongside questions the data sovereignty and cloud security. India's digital economy rests physically on two concentrated assets, a handful of cable landing stations and a growing cluster of data centers. Their protection is no longer an IT question, it is a sovereignty question. So, two attackers surfaces you must name because your answer should feel specific rather than generic. Those are undersea cables and data centers. So then we are moving to next scene, that is India's protection architecture. India's protection architecture. What is India's protection architecture? Now the institutional map, teach your pen to draw this as a layered stack. So India's digital economy rests physically on two concentrated assets, a handful of cable landing stations, and a growing cluster of data centers. Their protection is no longer an IT question, it is a sovereignty question. India's protection architecture, layer 1, the legal foundation. Section 70 IT Act to Protected Systems, Section 70A NCIIPC, the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, the nodal agency for CAI protection across sectors like power banking, telecom transport, government and strategic enterprises. Then layer 2 is independent incident response, that is set in the National Computer Emergency Response Team, the statutory nodal agency under Section 70B of the IT Act, and sectoral sets for domain like power and finance, and name its hardest instrument because scene 9 will call for mandatory reporting, and this is what created it. The certain directions of 28 April 2022 issued under Section 70B Clause 6 and effective from the June. Four obligations to carry. What are the four obligations? Reporting of specified cyber incidents to set in within 6 hours, and note the trigger precisely because it is the examinable detail. 6 hours from becoming aware, not from the incident, and not from completing a root cause analysis. An expanded list of mandatorily reportable incident categories. 20 against 10 under 2013 rules. Retention of ICT system logs for a rolling 180 days within India. And a 5-year record keeping obligations on virtual private network, virtual private server, cloud and virtual asset service providers, subscriber identity, addresses, usage patterns. So the last obligation is the contested one, that is chapter 7 carries the debate. Layer 3, coordination. And here is your newest institution, that is CIMAC, the Cyber Multi Agency Center, established by MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs, on 22nd January 2025 under the Multi Agency Center platform. 8 participating agencies IB, CIRA, Defense Cyber Agency, DOT, Department of Telecom, CERTIN, I4C, NCIIPC, and NIC. So its mandate. What is the mandate? Cybercrime, cyber espionage, cyber terrorism, and misuse of emerging technologies against national security through real-time monitoring, shared threat intelligence, and coordinated response. Most aspirants will stop at certain. You will write CIMAC. That is the difference between 2019 preparation and 2026 preparation. Comes to the layer 4. Supply chain and standards control. Trusted telecom portal. Only trusted sources for telecom equipment. STQC, standardization, testing, and quality certification. Security clearances by MHA for investment in sensitive sectors. 1117 proposals concluded in the reporting year with economic threats explicitly part of the assessment. So layer 5, the physical side, the vital installations framework, 8 to 12 categorized installations, the CA with the CAPF deployment where required, CISF securing airports and the Delhi Metro. So this is all regarding about scene number 7, that is, and we are moving to scene number 8, that is the gap between architecture and assurance. Balance now. An answer that only lists institutions is a browser. UPSC wants assessment. Despite this architecture, four gaps persist. What are the four gaps? 1. India still operates under the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013 and still lacks a notified national cyber security strategy to replace it. Both names 2022 PYQ turns on exactly that gap between a policy that exists and that has stated and a strategy that it has been drafted and not notified. And the 2015 PYQ in this chapter's corner asked you to evaluate the 2013 policy directly. And the second one is regulation remains fragmented across sectoral regulators. While the attackers sees one integrated target, third one, the mandatory standards are thin for OT specifically. Most compliance frameworks were written for IT. Fourth one, public-private threat intelligence sharing is episodic. The most critical infrastructure is privately operated. So these are things. These are four things we are going to we discussed. So then we are moving to way forward. The resilience framework. Your way forward paragraph 12 measures but organize them under four verbs. That is design, detect, drill, recover. Comes to the design sector. Zero trust architecture, network segmentation between IT and OT, secure by design public procurement, firmware verification and country of origin checks, then multi-factor authentications. Then detect continuous internal monitoring of OT networks, AI-based anomaly detection, sectoral cyber fusion centers, and mandatory incident reporting, which as scene 7 established is not an aspiration but a standing legal duty under the 2022 set in directions with a 6-hour clock. This is detect and drill. Regular red team exercises, quarterly cyber defense exercises jointly with government, armed forces and private operators. A specialized OT cyber security workforce. And recover part. Offline backups and redundancy, rapid restoration and continuity plans. And one sentences is close to the framework. That is, treat OT security as national security, not as an IT issue. The goal is not an umbrella. The goal is not an unbreachable system which does not exist, but a resilient one that detects fast, isolates the breach, and restores essential services before disruption becomes disaster. So the economic survey 2025-2026 gives you the conceptual bow on top. That is resilience by design, redundant systems, distributed data architecture, domestic technological capacity, digital infrastructure treated as a strategic infrastructure. So the forward looking close here is quantum. End your best answer with one forward looking paragraph. Here it is, future quantum computers may break today's public key encryption, the cryptography protecting government communications, banking, defense networks, and critical infrastructure control system. The danger has a name, that is harvest now, decrypt later. Adversaries may be collecting India's encrypted data today to decrypt it when quantum capability matures. The response, post quantum cryptography, crypto agility, an inventory of vulnerable systems, a government migration roadmap, and mandatory quantum safe transition for critical infrastructure. One closing line for the examiner. Critical infrastructure protection is not a project with an end date. It is a permanent race between convergence and resilience. And quantum is simply the next lap. So moving to PYQ corner. What are the different elements of cyber security? Keeping in view the challenges in cyber security, examine the extent to which India has successfully developed a comprehensive national cyber security strategy. This question asked in 2022, 15 marker question 250 words. Considering the threats cyberspace possesses for the country, India needs a digital armed forces to prevent the crimes. Critically evaluate the National Security Policy 2013 outlining the challenges pursued in its effective implementation. This question asked in 2015, 12.5 marker 200 words. Keeping in view India's internal security, analyze the impact of cross-border cyber attacks. Also discuss defensive measures against these sophisticated attacks. This question asked in 2021, 10 marker 150 words. Discuss the potential threats of cyber attack and the security framework to prevent it. This question asked in 2017, 10 marker 150 words. Cyber warfare and preparedness printed full in chapter 5th. So read the lineage because it is the whole argument of scene 8. In 2015, UPSC asked you to critically evaluate the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. In 2020, it asked how far India has developed a comprehensive national cyber security strategy. 7 years apart, the same gap, the same gap, and a policy that exists has dated, and a strategy that has not been notified. That gap is still open, which means it is still askable. And every question above becomes sharper, newer, and more answerable through a critical infrastructure lens now you carry. The probable main question for mains 2026. The first one is the increasing convergence of information technology, operation technology, and Internet of Things networks that transform critical infrastructure security into a major national security challenges. Discuss India's vulnerabilities and suggest measures to build cyber security, cyber physical resilience. And second one, cyber attacks and critical infrastructure can produce consequences comparable to conventional armed attacks while remaining below the threshold of war. Examine the implications for India's deterrence posture and response options. Then next one is submarine communication cables are the hidden backbone of India's digital economy and national security. Examine their strategic significance and vulnerabilities. The five move of answers frame, that is the IT/OT convergence, has made critical infrastructure a national security challenge. First and foremost, define critical infrastructure and the IT/OT distinction. Then diagnose convergence-driven vulnerability chain, legacy imports, visibility fragmentation. Then dramatize strategic logic of gray zone infrastructure attack and one named surface, that is cables or data centers, anything. Then describe the layered architecture 70A section, NCI IPC, CERTIN, CIMAC, trusted supply chain, vital installations with the honest gap assessment, then deliver, design, detect, drill, recover, way forward, and quantum safe close. That is the chapter number 6. The centerpiece is now yours. This is the chapter number 6, critical infrastructure and cyber physical security. Then you are going to discuss. Then we are going to discuss chapter number 7. Chapter number 7 is cybercrime, the digital economy, and the data protection. So, crime at population scale. The scene 1 here is chapter 5 and 6 gave you the state versus state cyber story. This chapter is another half, that is crime against the citizen at population scale. And a warning before we begin, to not prepare this as a catalog of frauds. A list of scams is a newspaper column, not a mains answer. Frame it the way the examiner will. This chapter is about the security of India's digital public sphere and financial ecosystem. The trust infrastructure on which the world's largest digital economy runs. When a pensioner loses her savings to a digital arrest, the loss is not only hers. something larger is damaged. Confidence in the bank, the police, the phone, the state. That is why this is an internal security chapter. So, what is the evolution of the threat? Trace the arc. Because UPSC loves evolution framing. What is that arc? Generation 1 was crude, phishing emails, lottery scams, OTP theft. Then Generation 2 industrialized it. UPI fraud, swim swap, mule accounts, ransomware, sextortion, fake investment apps. Then Generation 3, where we now stand, is AI enabled and transnational. Digital arrest scams, criminals impersonating police, CBI, RBI holding victims hostage on video calls, deepfake impersonation of family members and officials, AI generated phishing indistinguishable from genuine communication, ransomware as a service, crime sold as a subscription, synthetic identities, and cross border scam centers, industrial compounds, often trafficking linked, running fraud against Indians from beyond India's jurisdiction. So, cybercrime has evolved from isolated fraud into a transnational ecosystem, organized like an industry, powered by AI, staffed sometimes by trafficking victims, and aimed at the trust that holds a digital economy together. So, so why this is internal security, not just policing? Six reasons. This paragraph converts the topic from GS2 governance to GS3 security. First one, it erodes confidence in digital governance itself, and India's model of DPI-led delivery runs on that confidence. So second one, it causes financial victimization at mass scale, concentrated among the elderly and first-time internet users. Third one, it funds organized crime and through mule networks and crypto channels connects to the money laundering and terror financing world of chapter 8. Then fourth one, it is transnational by design. Foreign hosted infrastructure, cross-border telecom routes, scam compounds outside our jurisdiction. Fifth one, it undermines trust in institutions. The digital arrest scam works precisely by weaponizing the citizens' belief in police authority. And sixth one, it's infrastructure. Mule accounts, SIM farms, laundering rails, is dual use, available to any actor, criminal or hostile state who wants to move money or cause harm at scale. So that is why this is as internal security problem, not just policing. So then we are moving to the response architecture. What is the response architecture? Institutions. Now the state's answer is build the same layered stack we drew in chapter number 6. This time for the citizen facing side. Frame it the way ministry does, like a four-pronged strategy: convergence, coordination, communication of capacity, then fill each branch at the machinery. At the apex, coordination CIMAC from chapter 6, the 8 agency cyber multi agency center, and beneath it, the operational hub. I4C, the Indian Cyber Crime, I4C, the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, upgraded to an attached office of MHA from 1 July 2024. 7 components: threat analysis, threat analytics, reporting portal, training, research and innovation, joint coordination teams, ecosystem management, and forensic laboratory. And I4C's foundation day event on 10th September 2024, the center itself is older and had been upgraded to an attached office of the ministry that July. 4 initiatives launched under the 100 days action plan. Learn all four with their figures. These are the freshest data anchors in your entire cyber preparation. The four initiatives, that is Samanvaya, giant MIS and data sharing platform for police forces. It's a Pratibimb, module apps, module maps, criminals and crime infrastructure on live maps. Rajasthan, Jharkhand, and Haryana police have run target hotspot operations on it. Then cyber commandos, a specialized cadre being raised across states, UTs, and central police organizations. Target of 5,000 over 5 years to 18 detained in the first batches at NPA, IITs, Triple ITs, RRU, and NFSU. Cyber Fraud Mitigation Center. Banks, payment aggregators, telecoms, and police under one roof. More than 11.37 lakh mule accounts frozen on its inputs. Suspect registry. A shared registry of cyber criminal identities, identifiers with banks and financial institutions. Over 9 lakh fraudulent transactions declined. More than 3,191 crores saved. So this is regarding I4C's initiatives. Samanvaya, Cyber Commandos, CFMS, and Suspected Registry. So the response architecture, the citizen layer. What is the citizen layer here? Now the layer that citizen actually touches. The National Cyber Crime Reporting Portal, cybercrime.gov.in, with the 1930 toll-free helpline. More than 62.72 lakh complaints reported, 1.53 lakh FIRs registered. Sit with those two numbers for a moment. We will return to the gap between them. A delivery note for the rest of this scene. The figures below are dense. Speak 3. Leave the remainder on screen. Yes, that is correct. So, Citizen Financial Cyber Fraud Reporting and Management System, CFC FRMS, launched in 2021. The golden hour mechanism, report fast, and the system freezes the money in transit across 375 plus onboarded financial intermediaries. More than 4,725 crores saved, 14.47 lakh victims benefited. The blocking machinery, 8.45 lakh SIM cards and 2.39 lakh IMEIs blocked. 827 malicious apps taken down, and the Sahyog portal automating takedown notices to intermediaries under Section 69A and 79 Class 3 Subclass B. I4C blocked 3962 Skype IDs, 83,867 WhatsApp accounts, and 827 mobile applications according to 2024 and 2025 MHA annual report. The coordination geography. 7 joint crime, cybercrime coordination teams mapped onto the hotspot belts. Mewat, Jamtara, the coordination geography. 7 joint cyber crime coordination teams mapped onto the hotspot belts. Mewat, Jamtara, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Chandigarh, Visakhapatnam, Guwahati. And the forensic backbone. National Cyber Forensic Laboratory Investigation, Dwarka NCFL evidence, Hyderabad evidence turnaround time cut by half. Cyber forensic come training labs commissioned in 33 states and UTs under the CCPWC scheme plus the preventive perimeter. Cyber Jagarukta Divas every first Wednesday. Cyber those 16 lakh strong following, and even the Prime Minister using Man Ki Baat to warn citizens about digital arrest. When fraud reaches population scale, awareness becomes national security communication. India's counter cyber security architecture now covers the full chain: prevention, suspect registry awareness, interception, 1930 CFC FRMS, golden hour CFMS MC, coordination, I4C JCCTS CIMAC, the prosecution, NCFL cyber commandos. So then we are moving to the honest paragraph next scene, that is enforcement weakness. Now the balance that earns marks. Return to those two numbers. Those are 62.72 lakh complaints, 1.53 lakhs FIRs. The conversion of complaints into cases remains the system's weakest link. So why? Multi-state jurisdiction. Multi-state jurisdiction. The victim, the mule account, the SIM and the criminal sit in 4 different states. Foreign hosted infrastructure and scam compounds beyond reach. VPNs and encryption. A shortage of forensic examiners and cyber trained investigators. The very gap the cyber commando program exists to close. Delayed reporting driven by stigma, especially in extortion and investment fraud. And the race against time, money moves in minutes, process moves in days. The reform direction, and now with a name, E0 FIR launched by I4C in May 2025 and piloted in Delhi automatically converts cyber financial crime complaints filed on the reporting portal of or the 1930 helpline into FIRs above the threshold of 10 lakh rupees. That is the conversion gap being attacked at the point where it opens. Alongside it, smoother interstate transfer of complaints, AI-based mule account identification at the banking end, and a deeper bank telecom platform integration, attacking the infrastructure of the fraud rather than chasing each fraud after this fact. So, what is the why conversion gap? Because we discussed 62 lakh 72,000 complaints, then only 1.53 lakh FIRs. Why this weak conversion gap? What are the reasons behind that? That is multi-state jurisdiction, foreign hosted infrastructure, VPNs and encryption, too few forensic examiners, delayed reporting through stigma, due to stigma, money in minutes, process in days. So what are the way forward? What are the works response by government? E0 FIR. These are all things done by government. So what is the conversion gap being attacked at the point where it opens alongside its smoother interstate of complaints interstate of complaints, AI mule account identification at the bank, deeper bank telecom platform integration, attacking the infrastructure of fraud rather than chasing each fraud after this fact. So then we are moving to data protection. Next thing that is most important, data protection, the DPDP layer. One seen on the law that guards the data itself. Because UPSC asked it directly in 2024. First one we are going to take lineage first. So what is the lineage? Puttaswamy 2017 privacy declared a fundamental right. The Justice B.N. Sri Krishna Committee 2018 the blueprint and itself at 2018 PYQ. Then the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. Its salient features. 5 is enough. Consent based processing of digital personal data with notice in plain language. Rights for the data principle, access correction erasure, grievance redressal, obligations on data fiduciaries, purpose limitation, security safeguards, breach notification with heavier duties for significant data fiduciaries, a data protection board of India for adjudication and penalties, and the exemptions, including for the state on grounds such as sovereignty, security, and public order, which is precisely where the security debate lives. The same exemptions that enable legitimate security functions are criticized as potentially over abroad. Present both sides in one sentence and move on. So the implementation position from the notification itself. The Digital Personal Data Protection Rules 2025 were notified on 13th November 2025. The board provisions took effective immediately. Consent manager registration applies 1 year on from November 2026. And the substantive obligations notice security safeguards breaching reporting data principal rights 18 months on from May 2027. So three operative details worth carrying because They are what a 10 marker actually rewards. Breach intimation to the board without delay, with a detailed report within 72 hours, retention of logs and data, retention of logs and personal data for at least 1 year, and for significant data fiduciaries, and annual data protections, impact assessment and audit, place a power for the government to bar specified personal data from leaving India, and the security limb, which is where this chapter's debate actually lives. The rules empower the central government to call for information from any data fiduciaries or intermediary, and where, where, where disclosure data fiduciary intermediary, and where disclosure would prejudicially affect the sovereignty and integrity of India, integrity of sovereignty of the state to direct the data principle not to be told. That is the statutory exemption made operational. Present it as the tension it is. The same provision that enables legitimate securely functions is the one critics call overbroad. Why this sits in security chapter? Data breaches feed fraud, fraud feeds laundering, and a population scale identity system without data protection is an attack surface, not an asset. So, what is the global dimension? What is the global dimension? Cybercrime ends where jurisdiction ends. Unless cooperation extends it, what are the needs? Cross border electronic evidence sharing, 24 into 7 subsist assistance network between national contact points, coordinated action against scam compounds, including the rescue dimension, because many compound workers are trafficking victims, which is why awareness campaigns against cyber slavery now run at Indian airports, and Interpol and bilateral channels for fugitive and asset tracing, and name the instruments because treaty regimes remain fragmented, is no longer the whole story. The UN Convention Against Cybercrime was adopted in December 2024 and opened for signature at Hanoi in October 2025 with 72 signatories. It enters into force 90 days after the 48th ratification, and signature is open until the end of 2026. India negotiated but has not signed. The reported hesitation running to data protection standards and the privacy architecture built on Puttaswamy case. And there is a domestic version of the same tension, which is the chapter should name because it is where argument actually bites. The set in directions of 2022 chapter 6 instrument require ICT logs to be held for 180 days within India, and require virtual private network, virtual private server, cloud, and virtual asset providers to retain subscriber records for 5 years. Present both sides in one breath. The security case is that anonymized infrastructure is the standing enabler of everything in scene 2 we discussed, and an investigator who cannot resolve an address to a subscriber cannot follow the crime anywhere. The counter case is that mandated retention converts every provider into a surveillance repository that several VPN operators with it to their Indian servers rather than comply, and that the obligation sits unnecessarily beside the data minimization logic of the DPDP framework you have just built. So notice the shape of that argument because it recurs across the whole paper. The same measure that makes crime traceable, makes citizens traceable, and the question is never whether to choose but whether to draw the line and who reviews it. The tension to name, that is global cyber cooperation framework, sit uneasily with the national data sovereignty and treat regimes remain fragmented, comes to the India's line cooperate and crime without surrendering jurisdiction over Indian data with human rights and privacy safeguards built in. Then we are moving to scene number 9, that is final thing, that is PYQ corner. So this head is among the paper's most reliable customers. 5 questions since 2018 and 2 of them 2024 alone. Describe the context and the salient features of Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. 10 marker question, 150 words asked in 2024. Discuss different types of cybercrimes and measure required to taken to fight the menace. Question asked in 2010 marker 150 words. What is Cyber Dome project? Explain how it can be useful in controlling internet crimes in India. This question asked in 2010 10 marker 150 words. Data security has assumed significant importance that digitized world due to rising cyber crimes. The Justice B.N. Sri Krishna Committee report addresses issues related to data security. What, in your view, the strengths and weaknesses and the reporting relating protection of personal data in cyberspace? This question asked in 2018 15 marker 250 words. Social media and encrypted messaging services. This printed in full in chapter 3. This question asked in 2024. Notice the pattern. 2018 data protection blueprint became 2024 data protection statute. And notice the 2018 questions own opening class. Due to rising cyber crimes, the examiners drew the lines between these chapters fraud material and its data protection seen before you did. But comes to the probable question for mains 2026, because these rules come and effective from 2025. Cybercrime has a probable question for mains 2026. Cybercrime has evolved from isolated fraud into a transnational ecosystem involving artificial intelligence, mule accounts, and cross-border scam centers. Analyze the enforcement challenges and suggest an integrated response. So, how to write an question? The ecosystem frame. First and foremost, evolution. Three generations ending in AI enabled translation, transnational fraud. Then elevation. Six reasons this is internal security, not routine policing. Comes to the move architecture. I foresees four initiatives with figures and the citizen layer. 1930 CFC FRM's golden hour. Then next one, honesty. The 62 lakh complaints versus 1.5 lakh FIRs gap and its causes. And next one, extension. DPDP data protection layer plus global cooperation with the sovereignty and caveat. So this is the way you have to write an answer for this cybercrime and digital economy and data protection. So this is the chapter 7, cyber arc warfare infrastructure crime. So one medium, four actors, four bodies of law. In chapter 4 we discuss supplies the strategy, nine instruments, four fronts, and in chapter 5 we discussed supplies the impunity. Chapter 4 supplies the strategy. Chapter 5 supplies the impunity. Chapter 6 supplies the target. Chapter 7 supplies the ecosystem. So what is the strategy in chapter 4? Nine instruments, four fronts. What is the impunity in chapter 5? Attribution, threshold, enforcement, treaty. And what is the target in chapter 6? We discussed ITOT, convergence, cables, C cables, data centers. What is the chapter 7 ecosystem? Mule accounts, SIM laundering rails. The recurring question here is the measure that makes crime traceable, makes citizens traceable. So this is the part 2, that is cyber arc. In these four chapters we discussed. Then we are moving to part 3, that is the money, the border, and the seas. In this next class we discussed the part 3.